Because there aren't that many wolves.
There's about to be a whole lot less.
Welcome back to another Last of Us breakdown where we go over the video game versus the show, as well as talking about all the details that happened during this week's Last of Us episode. Now, I will say, this episode was, definitely not the strongest. I feel like there was a lot of fluff they put in this just to push the story forward and give us details about stuff they could have solely given us during the other episodes as they went on their journey to Seattle. But it really feels like they just added a lot of fluff in there, and I'm kind of disappointed with it, especially with how good the last episode was. We had some really good moments last episode with the whole Jackson part that was really cool, and I wish we had that in the video game. Plus, we had great moments with the characters dealing with Joel's death. Like, all these things that really added to the episode. However, in this one, they just kept repeating the same things over and over again, had scenes that felt way too long, and also some very unnecessary ones, especially the scenes with Gale. So in this video, we'll be breaking it all down, starting from the beginning, going all to the end, and talking about the differences they made from the game, but also some of the stuff they actually kept that were pretty shot for shot. Now, when the episode starts off, we really get to see the devastation of Jackson with all the infected dead around it, which looks horrifying. Like, that's just a devastating thing we see in this town, just seeing how much it's affected them, seeing how much they've gone through. And we even get to see Tommy looking over Joel's body, which it was a good scene. It was a good scene seeing Tommy deal with his brother's death. Now, it's not the same as it was the video game, and I think the video game probably did a little better, but I do like how we have him there cleaning up Joel's body because he feels a responsibility to take care of his own brother, especially with everything that happened. He said Joel saved his life, which is like how in the beginning of season 1, Joel was the one that got him out of jail, which saved his life in the end because he didn't get infected and they were able to get out of there alive. I also really like the point where he says, "Give Sarah my love," which is just showing that he's thinking of his niece in the afterlife, which is just this really nice moment of him mourning over his brother's death. Now, I really like that part because it just shows what's going on, but it makes me wonder how it's going to kind of go forward because in the game, he blames himself for Joel's death because he was the one with Abby and them. He wasn't able to stop them. Instead, he got knocked out and wasn't able to do anything, which also sets up his revenge path, which they seem to totally remove out of this episode. And we'll talk more about that in a bit because I feel like we have to cover a couple more things that happened before that, but it was something I was extremely disappointed with in this episode. Now, he could always come back and still do that revenge path by showing up later on, but we'll see how they're going to be changing it, because so far, that's like my biggest gripe so far with the episode is getting rid of that entire part of the story within this episode. But then we have Ellie in the hospital waking up screaming because she's feeling that PTSD of dealing with Joel's death, which I think is fantastic, and it's setting up what's going to be happening later down the road with her having to deal with that PTSD of losing Joel. And I can't wait to see how they dive more into it with the story, because I feel like they're going to put more emphasis on it compared to the video game where we see it much later, and it's going to be a driving factor for Ellie in her quest for revenge. One of the things that's interesting too is in the game, we didn't see this. She was in the hospital. We do see her and Tommy talking after Joel's death in the evening, maybe the day after or something, because they never actually give us a proper timeline, but we can see that they're beat up, so we know it's relatively soon after everything has gone down. Now in this, we see that there's a tube running liquid out of her body, meaning when she got kicked, that ruptured something in her, kind of showing the non-video game effect of people getting hurt in real life, which is a good ad because it's showing, you know, she's being hurt a lot more than we actually see when we're playing the game, because in the game, she's just bruised up. But the one thing that's kind of weird to me is that it takes place 3 months later. Now in the game, everything kind of happens relatively quickly. Again, we don't really have a proper timeline, but I would assume it happens within the first week of everything going on. Getting ready to go against the revenge, Tommy leaves, dealing with Joel's death, like everything happens so quickly to push us through the story and have this sense of urgency to go after Abby and take her down and the rest of her friends because of what they did to Joel. Now again, they removed all of this by having a 3-month time jump, having Ellie be in the hospital this entire time, which I feel like is a very questionable thing to do. I might only be feeling this way because of playing the game and how quickly everything moved, but it feels like something that they added, which just added a bunch of other scenes in this episode that felt very, very unnecessary. Like with Gale coming in to see Ellie. I mean, this did added a couple extra things that weren't bad, but I feel like it was very unnecessary. It's just trying to like get more information out of Ellie and see how she's dealing with her trauma now, and also give more reference to the dance and everything that went on there, because in the game, we didn't see the dance stuff until later, way later on, which is something they showed us right away, which I don't mind because it was something that really helped push the story forward, giving us Ellie and Dina's relationship, and kind of just put stuff more in a chronological order compared to the game where we got a lot of flashbacks. We even have her saying in this moment about how she should have talked to him afterwards, which in the game, she does. She talks to him on the porch, which might be something they still show later on in a flashback in a later episode, because in this moment, it's insinuating that she didn't talk to him. And it makes me question if we are going to get that scene later on, because it's a good scene to show, you know, them kind of trying to recuperate the relationship before he dies. It's also a scene where we get the details about Ellie finding out what happened to her in the hospital and giving us all that kind of drama that goes with them, and Ellie talking about how she doesn't know if she can forgive him, and it's a really important scene. Now, of course, this is something we should get later on when she's remembering about the trauma, but by putting Gil's section in the episode here, it kind of removes some of that. Like, I feel like they should just not put that in there so we could get to this flashback eventually later in the season, so that we can deal with her trauma and everything else she's dealing with when it comes to her blaming Joel for taking her out of the hospital. I just don't think the Gil scene was a good thing to put in here. But now in this way, it's just showing that the last thing she said to him was their fight at the dance, and that was it. And then she never got to say goodbye. She never got to make up in a proper way. And the thing that makes me feel like she's lying to Gil in this moment is because Gil later tells Tommy when they're talking that she's a liar. So it makes me feel at least that's what they're kind of teasing here. So we still have a few episodes left, so we'll kind of see where they go with this afterwards. But we also have Gil asking about how Joel wronged her and how he saved her in season 1, which is what we saw Joel tell Gil in episode 1, kind of showing that Gil's kind of starting to put a picture in her head about what Ellie and Joel were doing, which I feel like Gil in this season in general is kind of a pointless story. I don't know what they're doing with her. Like, are we even going to see her after this episode? Because she was just there to talk to the characters to get more of their emotion out, which I would personally rather see them dealing with this with other characters that we're going to see throughout the entire season, and see them actually dealing with it in a different way rather than just talking to a therapist. Which I will say, I did like the Joel part in the first episode. It was a nice scene just to see what he's going through, but I think that's all we needed. We didn't need another scene with her talking to Tommy and Ellie. And the thing is, in this moment, Ellie's acting dumb, like she doesn't know what Gil's talking about what Joel did. And she plays it off as kind of a joke, just kind of like pushing it away, acting like she's perfectly fine. But in this way, it's kind of protecting their secret, because no one's supposed to know that Ellie's immune and the stuff she went through at the Firefly Hospital. Which I just feel like, at least for maybe that part, is foreshadowing more people learning about her immunity, maybe later down the road, and just kind of going from that moment. But otherwise, it felt kind of pointless, just a little. Just, it doesn't really know, I don't really know what they're going with that point, but I guess we'll see. You know, I don't want to judge too quickly, because stuff could easily change, and it could all kind of come together when we get to further episodes, but right now, it just kind of feels a little weird. But I will say, after the scene when they go to Joel's house, I do really like seeing the flowers and letters that are at the front. It's a really nice moment to show how the community respected Joel. And this is kind of the part of the episode where we start getting to more of the stuff that's like the game. Like in the game, you go to Joel's house to pick something up, but in this, it's her going to Joel's house and going to see everything that's inside. So we have her going to find the box that has his watch and the gun in it, and this scene plays out almost exactly like how you interact with it in the game, where you go and find his watch, move the piece of material out of the way, grab the gun, and she takes the watch and the gun, just like the game, and gets ready to go on her revenge quest for taking down Abby and her friends. We even have her walking past Joel's woodworking station, which we do get to see in the game, and in the game we also get to see Ellie's notebook that has a bunch of drawings in it, as well as talking about Tommy telling her about the WLF, and who was responsible and which group they're with. They're from Seattle, and like, just setting up all the plot. Now, even with the woodworking part, we also have a scene where she goes and smells Joel's jacket, just like the game. Another interactive object you get to touch in the game, and I really like how they kept these in, because it shows that emotional impact, and I feel like it was devastating. Like, it made you feel for Ellie, it made you feel for Joel's death, and I think they did a good job with that. Like, these scenes were done really well, which I think worked really well for the episode. But, you know, the parts I still don't feel like that worked, and I'm probably going to say this a couple times during the episode, is the fact of the Gil scenes, and then the council scene later on. Even though it added a little bit extra detail, I felt way too long and stretched out. But we'll get to that. We're almost there. Because first, we have actually Dina coming to see Ellie, and in this moment, it's kind of like the game, where in the game, when you go into Joel's house, you talk to Maria, but you also have Dina there, because Dina goes with you. But in this moment, it's actually Dina going to see Ellie and give her cookies to apologize for not telling her the details sooner. She didn't tell anyone for 3 months about who the people were that killed Joel, to make it sure that they had time to prep for the town to heal, which makes sense, like not telling Tommy and them right away, because she doesn't want everyone to kind of go into chaos to like go track them down and kill them. She wants to help the town first, because it's been wrecked by all these infected. And I do say, I really kind of wish we did get maybe a moment of them returning to the town with Jesse, Dina, Ellie, and then with Joel's body, to get that interaction with Tommy, and also having them interact with the town after this devastating event happened. But instead, we didn't get any of that, and we just had Dina telling Ellie about the WLF, the Washington Liberation Front, aka the Wolves, and setting up who Abby and all her friends were to Ellie, which is what Tommy does in the game. Which in the game, Tommy also gives her food, because Ellie hasn't been eating. So the cookies are kind of like a little homage to that, which is nice to see. And now the thing is, I feel like they added this scene with Dina to really amplify the relationship, giving them more of a bond, because they set up the fact that Dina was seeing Ellie in the hospital multiple times, and they also set up how Dina loved Joel too, because they had a relationship where they cared about each other, they were friends, and it's just setting up the bond of Dina and Ellie getting closer and closer throughout the season, which does get dove into a little bit more by the end of the episode, which we will talk about, because that's another scene that wasn't in the game, but it took elements from the game and kind of put it into a different place. Now in the game, after all this, they pretty much leave right away. Like, they're gone. They go after Abby and her friends. They go to get the revenge. But instead, they really drag it out with that 3 months and everything else, which I feel like is something, again, I don't really totally agree with that, because I like the sense of urgency there is in the game that pushed the story forward. But the way Dina explains it is the reason she waited 3 months to tell Ellie about this information is because she wanted Ellie to heal, which does make sense. And like I said before, she wanted the town to get better. Again, makes sense. And now, one of the other things when it comes to the WLF and talking about Abby and her friends, we also get to see this information in a notebook in the game, which I thought was a nice touch, that we got to see the WLF logo with Dina showing her what it is. Now, after the talk with Dina, they end up going to see Tommy. Now, like I said before, Tommy was the one that actually told Ellie in the game about all this information, so the events played out a little differently, but still had similar elements and conversation points that they had in the game. Like when she goes to talk to Tommy, Ellie tells him that Joel would have done the same for him. This happened to Tommy instead of Joel, and Tommy's saying no, he wouldn't, which is just like how they had that conversation in the game. And also Tommy saying, let me talk to Maria, we can see if we can get more people to come and help, which again, is similar to the game. They even have a hug, all kind of tying back to that conversation. However, in this, it seems like Tommy doesn't want to go. And now in this, even though the conversation is pretty similar to the game, the events play out a lot differently. Just like how he says that the gravestones are actually a little bit out of town, which in the game, they're actually in the town. And we also see them right away after the conversation with Tommy in the evening. The next day or so, we just see Ellie going to Joel's grave and then to Joel's house to talk to Maria and go through all the stuff that we just talked about not long ago, where she goes to talk to Maria and look at all Joel's stuff, just like how she did in this episode. So things were moved around a bit, just like how they did in the last couple episodes. They have moved pieces that kind of like go in certain places, but the stories float. Now in this, the way they did this, having her go to see the grave after everything and sneaking out, felt a little off. Now, I don't really know why they kept the bodies out of town, maybe because there was just way too many to keep inside, but it was interesting to add that in there. And I do like the scene where she goes to see Joel's grave. It's a really nice emotional scene of her saying goodbye, putting the coffee beans there, because that's something Joel loved, and it is a really nice moment. But now it's time to talk about the council meeting that never happened in the game, and I think was probably the longest, most pointless part of the episode, which is pretty much just everyone in the town not showing favor for going after these people and trying to get revenge for Joel because they think it's unnecessary. They have people that they need to protect this town, especially now that it's been wrecked. They need their strongest people here. They can't afford to send them away because what happens if they get raided? Which I will say, Tommy does reference in the game, so it is keeping in those little details, which I get. It makes sense. You don't want to send your strongest people away because you could get raided and it could put everyone at risk. Yeah, that totally makes sense. So having this scene really didn't seem important to me. If they kept stuff like the game where Tommy is the one that runs off, they would never have this conversation. They would have just went straight into it, which again, they feels like super pointless to add all this in there. And I feel like they added this here to give Seth another moment. In the first episode, he was an asshat, calling them dykes, being a complete offensive person. But then now in the second episode, we had him apologizing just like the game. And now in the third episode, they made it so that he was a nice guy. He wanted to make up for his mistakes. He wanted to go after everyone because he respected Joel. Even though Joel's the one that knocked his ass to the ground, he wanted to get that revenge, which I don't mind. I do kind of like that Seth is the one standing up because, you know, he realized he was wrong. He wants to help, and I feel like he feels guilty as well for what happened because of how he reacted to Dina and Ellie kissing. He feels bad for what he did. Actually feels bad, and this is just kind of showing more of that. He wants to make it up to her. But then eventually we do get to Ellie's conversation where she's trying to get everyone to help them, thinking that they need to find justice. They need to be able to count on one another, which I think it's a good scene to try to get her, have her try to get people to help them out, but utterly pointless in the end because if you've played the game, we all know what's going to happen. They're going to go off by themselves. So I feel like it was just a scene to add for really no context. I think it would just made more sense if they were just running off on their own, not asking for anyone's help, because they don't want to drag anyone else into this revenge plot, and they feel like they can handle it on their own. Because, like in the game, we do have Ellie going to talk to Maria, because Tommy is already left. He's already taken off to go do his own revenge, and he tells Maria not to let Ellie go. Tell her to lock her away, take away all her guns, her supplies, to make sure that Ellie is safe, because he doesn't want Ellie getting involved in this, which I think is great. I think it's great character motivation to show that Tommy's trying to watch over his brother's kid in a way. He's trying to take care of this semi-niece he has, but instead, in this, we just have Tommy wanting to help her get people and Tommy staying in town while Ellie's the one that leaves in the middle of the night rather than having him do it, which I am disappointed they took that out because that is such a big part of the story. It doesn't really make sense that they took it out. And even in the game, Maria lets them go anyways because she knows how much this means to Ellie and she knows that you can't stop her either way, so she ends up supplying her with ammo and allowing her to take Shimmer, which in this, it's actually Dina that does all of this. You know, they get Shimmer out of there. Dina's the one that helps her set it all up, having Seth be the one surprisingly to do it all, and Seth giving her a new rifle, which in the game takes us a while to get, which overall is just disappointing that we didn't get that whole Tommy already left kind of scene because I feel like that's important for his character, and Like it dwindles away that we haven't gone yet. But then speaking of Tommy, we also have Tommy going to see Gail, who's at a kid's baseball game for some reason, and they end up talking about how Ellie's a liar and how Tommy wants to protect her and all of this stuff. And I feel like it's just a really pointless scene to show that Ellie has this hatred in her already, this rage that's already there. And it wasn't because of Joel. She's always been like that, and they've always walked side by side. And I think that was just to highlight that Ellie is a little darker herself, and that she has this inner rage in her to want vengeance, to go after them. Showing that, you know, she's been raised in this apocalypse. She's not this innocent kid. She has the bloodlust. And I think that's the only reason they put this in here, is to show her kind of motivation. But that, like, otherwise, I don't see a point of having that there. Like, it was nice to see Tommy wanting to protect Ellie. And I feel like that is the reason that they put this here as well, because they didn't have the scene of Tommy leaving and telling Maria not to let Ellie go. Because in the game, that is Tommy trying to protect Ellie. But in this, you just have Tommy talking to Gail, the therapist. And I feel like they really just let the ball drop on this one. And I don't know what they did. We have 2 really good episodes to start the season off with, and then this one just fell flat for me. And other than everything else that's going on with Tommy, I feel like the only reason they're not sending him off is because they gave him a kid, and they made him pretty much the leader of Jackson. That's like the only reason they're not sending him off, which he has a lot more to lose, which I guess, yeah, makes sense. But I don't know how they're going to deal with this story in this entire season. Like, are they just going to remove him completely? Is he going to come in later on? Is he going to come in for like this cool save to help Ellie and Dina at some point? Or is he just not involved at all? I mean, time will tell. I'm kind of disappointed that he's not there, but we'll see what happens next. And hopefully he shows up, because he has some pretty badass moments I'm not going to show in the game that I want to see. Now, when we pick up with Ellie, she's getting her supplies ready for this trip, and she's working on a workbench, which is a nice homage to the game where you'd go on different levels, and every so often you come across a workbench to upgrade your weapons, and yeah, that's pretty much what it is. And I do like this added scene here with Dina coming in, bringing in the map, which we do see in the game. It's something that they find and helps them navigate Seattle. But in this, we have her coming in to tell Ellie that she needs medical supplies, food, and all that, and she shouldn't just focus on guns. You know, being kind of the smarter one rather than them just going off on their own like they did in the game. You know, prepping a little better than before. But I do like how they still take Shimmer, just like how in the game where you get Shimmer from Maria, Dina's also prepped this so that she can get her horse and they can go on their little adventure. As well as in the game, they leave when it's still bright out, but this they sneak out at night because no one else is supposed to know they're leaving. Which again, another big change, especially like I said, Seth's the one helping them, and they leave through the gates where there's no patrol, just like how it is in the game. So they have some of the elements there, but just not completely like how they played it out in the game. And I think that's all because they took out Tommy. I'm going to keep saying that. Just because they took out Tommy, a lot of these things didn't play out the same way. Now, they do end up heading out to Seattle, and we do cut to it, which is nice because we don't need to watch their whole journey from where they are all the way to Seattle. Which in the game, they do the same thing. They leave and then we pick up with them on their first day in Seattle. Now, we do have a similar conversation they had in this show as they did the game, where Ellie's talking about the first kill, how the guy was on top of Joel and she came in, setting up just like how the game, she did the same thing, but this guy was drowning Joel. So they swapped a couple things here because it didn't happen the same way in season 1, but I do like how they kept the same conversation about Ellie's first kill. We also never had their camping scene in the game. That was completely something new, but they did take pieces of the conversation from the scene that we never got last episode where Dean and Ellie were the ones in Eugene's pop farm and not Jesse and Ellie. Now in the game, Ellie and Dina were talking about how Dina's kiss was, and she asked the same question here, but the way they kind of did this was interesting because it feels like they're doing a slow burn for the relationship rather than kind of going full force into it. Because in the game, they do hook up there. They are kind of having a little fun moment as they smoke pot, and that sets up more of the relationship and kind of pushes them forward, which is why I'm disappointed they never had that pot smoking scene in the episode, but instead had her and Jesse there. Because that's like a big part for the relationship, kind of setting up who they are to each other, growing on one another even more. But instead, they didn't have that. And now we have this scene, which is setting up more of a slow burn. Dina is kind of teasing her feelings for Ellie by saying, you know, the kiss, I wasn't that high when I kissed you. Just teasing what's to come. Like, it feels like they just want a little tease to set up what's to come and nothing else. And I will say, I'm a little annoyed by that. I'd rather just have it kind of coming out faster because it feels like they're just dragging it on a little too long. I guess we'll see how they kind of dive more into the relationship because that's a really big part of the game. Now, we'll jump back a little bit into the Seraph fights, where in the game, they're also called the Scars. A very, very horrifying enemy we fight in the game, and I don't mean by looks, I just mean by creep factor, where you'd be walking through a level and you hear them whistling and you wouldn't know where they are and you'd be kind of on your nerves the entire level until you found them or they found you, which it feels like they're adding them a little bit more. This is like a religious cult, and you kind of hear how they talk about their prophets and how they keep themselves safe while following her teachings. Now, this is a game. Now, in the game, they're a big religious cult, and they have a lot of horrifying scenes in the game. So I'm really looking forward to seeing how they implement that in the show, because of how terrifying these characters are. Now, when it comes to the game, we do not see them in the suit. We do not see them in day 1 of Seattle. We see them way later into the gameplay, and it's a more horrifying scene in the dark, seeing these really gruesome people who are more of a primitivist cult. They use bow and arrows, they're They're definitely creepy. They're not into the technology. They kind of live off the land. And it's really interesting to see how we're getting them this early. And I feel like it's for one reason and one reason only, and it's to show how terrifying the WLF are and Abby's group. Kind of painting them more as a monster because of Ellie and Dina finding the scars being slaughtered after the WLF had come through, even taking out the children. Just trying to paint these characters as monsters and also set up Ellie's revenge path to be more justified. You know, these monsters, they took out children, so we gotta take them down. Which in the game, these two factions are at war, but it's like in such a different way, where the Seraphites are also monsters. They're terrible people. So they feel like they're sympathizing them a little bit here, and I don't understand why they're necessarily doing that, because when we get later down in the road in the story, they should not be sympathized whatsoever, except for a couple characters. But we're not there yet. I don't know why they put them so soon. It feels really off, and it just feels like it's the way to show the WLF being a lot more monstrous than they might actually be. Which, after all this, we do get to the scene where we see them walking down the street, and we get them 8 miles outside of Seattle, and we get to finally see what Seattle looks like, and it looks awesome. I will say, the way they have this design looks phenomenal. It looks great, and I'm looking forward to them exploring Seattle because, you know, it's a great part in the game. There's really cool interesting levels, and there's all these little cool things you get to do. Especially because in day one, when you're going around, there's a really nice open map area you get to walk around where you get to do little things. And there's a really important scene coming from that, which we will be getting this season, I think. And I'm really looking forward to seeing that. But I'm not going to say which one it is because I don't want to spoil it. And when you guys get to see it, it's a really good scene with Ellie and Dina. But the one thing they seem to be removing here is the Fedra gates that are around. Because in the game, when you're on your way to Seattle, there's gates surrounding the city because of Fedra locking it in. And you can only go through the checkpoints to get in and out. Now, in the game, it's an interactive part where you had to kind of go through, figure out the puzzle, get over the gate. But in this, they seem to get rid of it, which I don't think is totally a bad thing, but it does speed up the story just a little bit. But they do show the WLF, and they're making them seem more like a military outpost, which does make sense. They are very military in the game, and I'm curious to see how they're going to look like when we get to the Abby perspective of the game, because we do jump back and forth between playing as Ellie and Abby, seeing the different perspective as the characters and kind of learning the differences between the two. But we'll see. Like, I feel like this episode overall wasn't the strongest. There was a lot of moments in it that just felt very dragged out. Mainly the town hall meetings, the meetings with Gale, and then the random Jesse and Ellie scene I forgot to mention because it just did not seem that important compared to the rest of the story. And like I said throughout this whole video, I am not a fan of them taking out Tommy's whole I'm leaving first for revenge plot, because it just drives his character forward, and it's really disappointing they got rid of that. I feel like after the first 2 episodes, they had these 2 really strong episodes to start off the season, and then they just kind of, after the best episode so far, they just kind of like dropped the ball and kind of lost the plot. I'm disappointed. I feel like they could definitely do better. I'm hoping for better scenes when we go forward, but I do find it funny that a lot of people are talking about dropping the show because of Joel's death, and now they just put a poorer episode right after that episode. It's like, okay, if you don't want people to drop the show, why would you put this episode in? You know, they might have their reasons to do it. Maybe some of these things are going to become more important later down the road. I'm not going to hate on it too much yet. You know, I still love the show. I still want to see good things from it. And I love the games. It's making me want to play The Last of Us Part 2 again, which I might end up doing, and I might end up streaming. So if you want to see that, let me know down in the comments, because I'm planning it. I'm planning it. It's going to take me a bit of time to get it all ready and buy the game and all that but stuff, but I'm planning to do it. So let me know if you want to see that. But yeah, I have high hopes for the show. I still think they could do a great job. I'm really interested in seeing how they're going to be playing with the rest of the story, with swapping between Ellie and Abby, and like how they're going to deal with those story points, and you know how much else we're going to get before the end of the season and go into season 3, because they'll dive into more of the story for part 2 at that point. I feel like there's still so much more to come. I don't know how they're going to cover this game. Like, I don't know how much they're going to blow past to get through certain scenes, but there's like a lot to cover, and I'm very interested in seeing how they're going to do it. But let me know, what did you think of this episode? How do you feel about the big changes with Tommy, and what do you kind of wish they do in the future? I hope you enjoyed this video. Make sure to like and subscribe button. It helps out the channel a lot. And you get to stay up to date with all my Last of Us videos, everything else I do on this channel when it comes to Marvel, DC, and anime. Thanks again, and I'll talk to you next week when it's time to watch another episode of The Last of Us.